Okay, so we're back. It's lesson 7, part 2. So we've looked at our plan. We've talked about SSL. Just catching up on the chat. I think everybody's up to speed. So let's go ahead and start with our implementation of Google Authentication. So the first thing we're going to need to do is with the Google account, you can follow the link. It's in the slide deck. I'll put it in the chat if you like. So we're going to go to the Google Developers Console. And we're going to need to create a project there. So when you come late to class, you can't come into class and say, what did I miss? That's on you. I'm not sorry, but I'm not going to stop and go back and tell you what you missed or what we're doing. Stephen, the answer is yes. We're going to do it together. We're going to do the Google login together. And then you're going to need to follow it along for the project. So it's a good idea if we do it together now. You can ask questions, and then you'll know how to do it for your project. Okay, and I guess my link is wrong. Developer console, what did I? Oh. Guess I should fix that link. Thank you. Thanks, Justin. Yeah. console.developers.google.com. I always mix that up. I'll update this on Blackboard. I'll have to update that file. So it takes you here. I'm just teasing you, Farouk. So it defaults to your last project. So I'm going to make a new project. You may get this screen right away. So I'm going to click New Project, and I'll call it Get Me a Game. I'm not going to worry about the organization, and I'll just click Create. All of these screens are in the slide deck that's on Blackboard, but let's go through this together. So you are going to need to do this now for the game store, and then you're going to need to do it on your own for your assignment. So click Create. That's going to create a new project. So that's step 1. We'll let this run for a minute. That's interesting. Okay, I think somebody else, that's odd. I'm not sure. Maybe I try a different name. I'll make another project. Maybe because I had spaces in it. I don't know. Rich, get me a game. I'll try this. Okay, so it's created my project. I'm now going to select it. Stephen, are you're signed into a Google account, I assume? Okay, okay, yeah, try it again. So now I'm in my Get Me a Game project. Once we're in there, we then will want to click on this link that says Auth consent screen. No, don't be sorry. So click your OAuth consent screen. Be this link over here. And we're going to pick external, meaning we're not limited to a certain domain. Anybody with a public Google account can use any Google account to log in, and then click create. So under user type, we're picking external. There's a lot of stuff on this screen. We don't need to fill out most of it. We do need an application name. I could include the logo, so maybe I'll browse and include our logo because that'll show up on the little Google consent screen that users get. So we don't have to have a logo, but since we've got this great logo, I've got this great logo that Emily created, I may as well use it. Again, the logo part is optional, but I'll include it. Should have the email for your Google account. And then under authorized domains, because we want this to also work on Azure, we need to add Azure websites.net. So this is under the authorized domains section. Make sure you add Azure websites.net. So the only two things we need to add is a name, optional logo, and add Azure websites.net as an authorized domain. We don't need to authorize localhost. Yep, the name can have the spaces. So this will just appear at the title at the top of the Google login screen that pops up. Justin, make sure you add it in just the way I did. As Azure websites.net, no www, no HTTP. Well, let's check. If I go to domain verification, let's see here. We shouldn't need to do this in this case. Okay, Justin, I may have to look at yours later. I'm not sure because it seemed to take mine. So Azure websites.net should be the authorized domain. So now we can go to the credentials section. That's interesting. Wants me to configure the consent screen. I thought we just did this, but we'll try it again. Oh, it's because I put in a logo. I'm going to take my logo out, I think. I'm better off. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to delete. I'll do another one. The logo's causing me grief. Yes, you do, but it's asking me to verify. I don't want to have to submit for verification, really. I'm going to make another one. I'll redo this. I'll just start again. Yes, Justin, so we'll maybe have to look at it either a bit later when I've got time. So I'll call it Get Me a Game. I'll leave the logo out this time, and I'll add azurewebsites.net as my domain and save. Okay, that's fine. Verification not required. So now I'll go to credentials, and I'm going to click on Create Credentials, and I'm going to pick OAuth Client ID. Under application type, we're going to pick Web Application. We can give it a name. You can put anything in here. And then we need to put in 2 redirect URIs. So we need both our local URI, Universal Resource Indicator, as well as our Azure URI. So this will tell the Google service, hey, after someone signs into their Google account, Google needs to know, where do we redirect the user? Where do we send them back to? So I'm going to add 2 redirect URIs. The first one is going to be local. So I'm going to take my local domain, including my port number, and copy that to my clipboard, or I can just go back to the home page. And I'll put the URI you need in the chat. So it's going to be my local and then signin-Google. And I'll click Add. So I'm going to put this in the chat, but I've put it in where X's replace the port number. So whatever port number your website is using locally, you'll need to replace the X's, and then it's /signin-Google. So for me, the port number is 44355. For you, the port number may be different. So this will allow it to redirect back to my site when I'm running locally. If I just save it like this, though, as soon as I publish to Azure, the Google login will get broken. It'll authenticate, but then it isn't going to be able to send users back. And here's a warning. Every time I've given this assignment before, there are students who don't put in the Azure URL here, which means their Google login only works locally and doesn't work on Azure. To get full marks for the assignment, it has to work in both places. So I'm going to go to the Azure portal. I'm going to get my URL, or I may have to set up my website again. Okay, if I have a chance to look at that, it's strange because Google, it flashed me that error message, but it let me create it anyway. Okay, so I have my Get Me a Game service, which I will start up, and I'll grab the URL. So I'll click Start. So I'm going to copy the URL, and I'll go back to the Google portal, and I'm going to paste in the domain and also then add on the end the suffix signin-Google. And I'll click Add. So now I have these 2. So this Google application can redirect to sign-in-Google on my local domain, or to sign-in-Google on my production domain on Azure, either one. So now I'll click the Create button here. So fill in both your local and Azure domains. If your game store is not hosted on Azure, that's fine. Then you only need your local URI. But for your assignment, you definitely need both. And then I'll click Create. The Google console creates my OAuth client, and it gives me 2 keys, a client ID and client secret. So I'm going to leave this screen up because we're going to need to copy and paste these into our application. So our web application can authenticate through this particular Google app. Okay, let's see what we can do here. Google Developer Console. I'm not sure why so many of you are getting this, but I am not. Okay, anyone who's getting that error, maybe try to create a new project with a different name. Make sure you do not include the logo. When I included the logo, it wanted to verify my domain. So Rebecca had the same experience as me. So try a new project and make sure you don't include a logo. So once you created the project, I'll go through the steps again. We can always come back and see the keys. So once you've created, set up the OAuth consent screen, you go to create credentials, you create an OAuth client ID, you pick web application, you give it a name, you can even leave the default name, and then you need to add the redirect URIs and click create. So those redirect URIs I've put one in the chat already, and then it would be, the other one would be HTTPS your Azure site.azure. I'm putting the other one in the chat as well. And again, you would replace the word your Azure site with whatever the domain is to your site. So maybe Diana, Justin, or Dia, you can let me know if you're able to properly create the client this time. And you just added the name and that was it? The name and the domain? The other thing you could try for now, let's see if this will work, because we can always go back and edit it. Okay, you can try the full, that's I didn't think you could do that, but Rudia, sure, go for it. If that works to put the full URL into your Azure homepage, it says not to do that, but if that works, try it out. And then you can create the OAuth client. Okay, I didn't think it would let you do that without HTTPS, but if it lets you put in your subdomain, great. So then you'll add the redirect URIs, your local domain /signin -Google and your Azure domain signin -Google. I would just leave it, Justin, to it probably. I don't know is the simple answer. It may be that the email has to be a Google account. I honestly don't know. You can try switching it to your Georgian account. It might work. I'm not sure. I've never tried using a non-Google account. Well, yes, it'll be required. I don't know if it has to be a Google account or not. So once we've got the client created, it should show in our list of client IDs, here's our client ID. And then we can see the ID and secret if I click edit. So now I'm going to go back to my web project because we want to integrate things into our project. So I'm going to use the key vault. And you may want to open up these slides because it's got the commands we need. I could put them in app settings.json, but I'm going to use the key vault instead. You need the client ID and the client secret. So I'm going to open up my package manager console. And it tells me here, it shows me my Get Me a Game project. I want to check which directory I'm in. So the first thing I'm going to do is run the command dir. Now, some of you will have a different setup from me. The way my project is set up, in my root folder, I've got my SLN file, and then my web project is in a subfolder. If you're set up like me, we need to go into the project folder here that I've highlighted. If you see all of your files here, like your models, views, controllers, then you don't have to do anything. I'm going to type cd COMP2084 get me a game. So I need to go inside of the web folder here. So I'm going to run that command. And then the commands I need are here. I'm going to initialize my user secrets. So I'm going to run the command .NET user secrets init. And now I want to save the client ID and the client secret from Google into my Windows, into my project secrets cache. So I'll put the code in the chat. You'll have to modify it, but it's also in the slide deck. So I'm going to create a .NET user secret called Authentication Google Client ID. And then I need to paste in the value. Whoops, actually I should update this. Take this out. We don't need this part. Sorry, it's a shortened version. So I'm going to grab this command, but I'm not going to run it yet. I'll grab the first one. And then I'm going to take out in quotes where it says paste ID here. I'm going to go back to the Google console. If I edit my credentials, I can see here's my client ID. So I'm going to grab that value, copy it, and I'm going to paste it in to the console. So this is going to set up a secret key called Authentication Google Client ID. And I'm taking the client ID from the Google console. So now I'll hit enter. And it tells me it saved this key with this value to the secret store. I need to repeat that with my client secret. So I'm going to copy that next command. You can get it from the chat or from the slides. I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to grab my client secret. I'll try that again. Are we sure about that? Mine is Azure Web Sites, plural. So let me try again with my secret because I messed it up. I'll grab the value. Okay, so now I've saved my secrets. Okay, you can try it that way, Diana. I'm not sure what will happen. So I've got two secrets, my Google Client ID and my Google Client secret. Okay. Open your Package Manager console. And the commands are in the chat. So Justin, the first thing you need to do is run the command dir at the console. If you see all of these folders, the controllers, the models, the views, you're in the right folder. If you don't see the models, views, and controllers, when you run the dir command, it probably looks something like this. You see a solution and you see a folder with the name of your project. If you do, we need to go into the folder with our project. So we would run cd and then the name of our project. Then you're going to run this command. .NET user secrets set, and you're going to copy the client ID from the Google. No, I have not changed app settings at all. We could put the keys in app settings, but this is more secure. So I'm showing you the more secure way of doing it. App settings is easier. It's not really recommended. So Justin, once you've run the command to save the client ID, and you've got to copy and paste that value from the Google console, you then need to run the command again, but this time to save the client secret. And again, you'll copy and paste that value from the Google console. So this is going to work on my local computer, but these secrets, Azure doesn't have access to them. Yes, we did run .NET user secrets in it first, sorry. Thank you, Farouk, for mentioning that. So Azure has kind of its own version of the key vault. So I've set it up here. I want to go to my Azure site and also add these keys there. So in my Azure portal, in the settings section, I have a configuration option here. You'll see these subheadings. There's deployment, there's settings. Here's configuration. I'm going to click it. And I want to save the Google Client ID and Google Client Secret in here as well. So I'm going to click this under Application Settings. There's a button here that says New Application Setting. I've got it highlighted in blue here. We'll click that. So our name, the first name is going to be I already put it in here, so I created one. So call it Authentication : Google : Client ID. And then again, paste your client ID from Google. You then repeat it with the client secret. So we're creating two settings, one called Client ID, Authentication Google Client ID. The other is Authentication Google Client Secret. And when you're done, the Save button on the toolbar should become enabled, and you just click the Save button. So you can see I have both of these keys here. Authentication Google Client ID and Authentication Google Client Secret. Click the Save button when you've added those to the Azure portal. And we've got two more steps to complete. We need to install the Google Authentication library, and then we need to add some code in Startup to enable Google. And then our application will automatically read the keys, and Google Login should just run. So I'm going to go back to Visual Studio. And I want to install the Google package. And again, there's screenshots of what we just did on Blackboard. On slide 13 is the command we need to run. I'll put it in the chat as well. We're going to install this package through the package manager console. So I'm going to copy that line from my slide deck. I've put it in the chat for you as well. So I'm installing the .NET Core Google Authentication library. So just add that to Package Manager Console. If we go and look at our project dependencies now under Packages, we can see it's added Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication Google. And now we just need to configure Google at startup when our project runs. So I'm going to open my startup file. And before we add the controllers with views, we're going to enable Google Auth. So we're going to add to our list of services. We're going to add authentication. And we're going to add Google and set up the options. So the options we need are our Google API keys. So we're going to use iConfiguration. This will read the keys from our key vault. So it's going to read that authentication Google section. Actually, I guess that can just go here. And then we're going to set the client ID, and the client secret. So on our local server, this reads these two values from the secret key vault. On Azure, it reads them from the configuration section. So this code should work both locally and on Azure. If we added these to app-settings.json, it would also work, but the key vault is safer. So I'll give you this code. It's in the chat. Enable authentication for Google. Use our key vault in the Google section and grab the client ID and secret and pass those to our Google library. So now I can try this out. So I'll build my changes. And then I'm going to try this in a private window. I'm already logged in my current window to a Google account. So I'm going to open it up in a private window where I'm not logged in. And then if this works, I want to publish my changes to Azure and see if the Google login works on Azure. So I'll go to login and notice my Google button appears now. So this code in startup, this is what makes the Google button show up. Without this code, our login page says there are no external providers configured. So now I can click my Google button. It says get me a game. So this is where we set up our application name. It shows up in this screen. We'll pick a Google account. And it redirects me back now and says I've successfully authenticated, enter an email address, and click register. So now I'm signed in with a Google account. If I go and check the database, we won't see this email in the ASP.NET users table, but I'll see now one record in ASP.NET user logins. We can go and check there. Then I want to publish this to Azure and try my Google login there as well. So if I look in my ASP.NET user logins, I should have one record now. So I now have a new user with my Google login. I'm going to push my changes to GitHub, which will automatically deploy to Azure, and then I can try my Google login on Azure as well. So I'll push the changes. And then I'm going to go to I'm in a private window. So now I'm going to try it on Azure now that I've pushed my changes that includes Google login. And I've added in my configuration, I've added the Google Client ID and Google Client Secret to the Azure portal as well. So I've got Client ID and Client Secret. When I click Login, so now I get a Google login button. I'll use a different Google account. Yep, I will. Okay, let me just see, what did I miss? Get me a game. I'll go back and check my Azure URL. Okay, here's the startup. Diana, so this section is new. Justin, it's certainly possible that they did. So it did also change, interestingly. It did change my authorized domain, as Diana or Rudia mentioned. Rather than azurewebsites.net, it wanted the full domain. Must be hosted on authorized domains. Let's see. So we've got an authorized domain. Subdomain. I'm not sure if it's going to let us do this because we don't own azurewebsites.net. It used to let it, that Google used to let us do this. Okay, so your login works on Azure. Let's see. Oh, this gets messy. Okay, we may not be able to because Google has changed this. So let's say with an HURL or with the domain. Maybe I have to register it in the Search Console. Let's see. Haven't had to do this before, but maybe I do now. Let's add a property. So we don't have access to the DNS configuration to do this. Google's made this pretty challenging. Okay, I will have to come back to this because Google has changed this. And it won't let us verify the domain because we don't own it. So for now, we're just going to log in locally. Either I'll resolve that with instructions or I'll remove that requirement from the assignment for it to work on Azure. There's probably a workaround for this, but I'll have to think about what it is. This will be my last try for today. Okay, this may work to verify it. I can go through the process again. I'm going to try it. I'm going to download the verification file, or I could add a meta tag on the home page. That's probably easier. Let me copy that. If I put it in the meta tag in my layout and push my changes, I can try and verify. So I went to the Google Search Console. I grabbed the meta tag and I'm going to try to push it this way. I'll try it. We're about due for a break, and then I'm going to give you your activity for the rest of class in a minute. This will be my last attempt to verify with Google for right now. I'll check that my meta tag is here. If so, I'll update the instructions how to verify your domain with Google. They made this a lot more complicated than it used to be. Okay, so now I've got my Google meta tag. So now I'll try to verify. Okay, so now my ownership is verified. If I refresh the Google console, my login should work now, I think, on Azure. Now that I've verified, I think I can add it. Well, you can do the activity on your own time, or you can do it together in class. It's up to you. It's worth part of the 10% for your in-class activity marks. Okay, I'm going to try one more time. Now that I've verified my domain, I'll try Google again. Okay, I will fix that. Let's take a 10-minute break here. When we come back, I'm going to put you into groups. And in groups, you can try implementing either Facebook, Twitter, or Microsoft login. If you're watching at home, then you can do that on your own. You have a couple weeks to do it and push it up to GitHub and send me a link to it so that I can check it. So that will count for part of your 10% in-class work. So let's take a 10-minute break here. all the code we've done so far. Yeah, try it locally. Try it locally. If you can get it to work live, great, but start locally. We'll come back in 10 minutes.